Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Sunday Evenings with Joe. I'm going to be doing a poem or a story or a combination of both or something or other every Sunday night from now on until further notice, especially during this lockdown period. So, episode 1, The King. Once upon a time there lived a king, and one day he called his wise counsel to him and he said, "Do you know, I'm the luckiest man in the world. I've got this wonderful kingdom, loyal subjects. I've got youth and strength and wealth on my side. And yet, I'm a lonely man. Advise me." And his counsel said to him, "With respect, your majesty, you're not doing a lot about it." He said, "You're already in your 30s and you haven't taken a bride. Why have you not taken a bride as yet?" And the king, he was a bit of a witty character, and he said, "Because the available aren't suitable, and the suitable aren't available." And to this, his wise counsel said, "Well, if you were to take yourself out of this lovely castle and go out amongst the common people, you would find plenty that are available and plenty that are suitable." The king took him at his word, and the very next morning he got up bright and early, and he climbed into his lovely sparkling chariot and off with him to Ballycastle Fair. And the monarch walked amongst the common people, and there on the grassy field he saw young girls sitting there making daisy chains, and he thought to himself, how delightful. He walked on a bit further and he saw some older ladies, gypsy women, with bangles and beads, and they were reading palms and telling fortunes. And the king thought, how absolutely quaint is this? And then he heard the sound of singing, and it was so enchanting and melodic. He followed it, and finally he found the source. There was these two beautiful girls. They turned out to be sisters, and they had sparkling eyes and rosy cheeks, and they had a huge crowd of people around them, and their voices soared and larked in the most harmonious and melodic fashion. And the king, like everybody else, was smitten beyond belief with these two beautiful girls. And he stood there amongst the common people watching this, and he thought, look what I've been missing all this time, locked away in my wealthy plush castle. When they had finished, the king sent an envoy to the girls to advise them that they had been invited for an audience with the king at his castle. The king sat with the two girls for quite a while, and then he chose one. He made her his bride, he made her his queen. And the other girl, the sister, for they were sisters, she married a poor man from the other side of the kingdom. 2 years into the marriage, the king noticed that his queen had started to lose ground quite a lot. She had become sort of withdrawn, disinterested in things that she used to love, like music and singing. The sparkle had left her eyes, the rosy colour had left her cheeks, and he became terribly worried for her, for he loved her a great deal. And so he summoned his royal physician. He said, "Examine my queen and report to me what is the matter with her." The physician did so, and he said, "I can't find anything the matter with your queen, your majesty." He said, "The diagnosis is beyond me. She's physically perfect." And so the king summoned his wise counsel again, and he said, "What is the matter with my queen? Why is she showing signs of ill health and disinterest and sadness like this?" And the wise counsel said to him, "I too can't tell you anything whatsoever about your queen, your majesty, but I can tell you this. Her sister, who married the poor man, is still as vital and as vibrant as ever. She entertains scores of people, sends them away with a song on their lips and a smile in their eyes. And if anything, she's even more beautiful now than she was when you first met the two girls a while back." The king said, "Take me to this poor man." So they hopped into the chariot, into the king's chariot, and they raced across the kingdom. And the king approached the poor man working in the fields, and he said, "What is it you are doing with your wife, your bride, that has made her to retain her well-being and her good health and her vibrancy and vitality? I mean, what is it? I'm the king. It's hardly her diet, surely. I'm the king. I can afford the best of everything." And the poor man looked at him and he said, "Well, seeing as you mentioned diet," he said, "I'll tell you this. When I go home from the fields in the evening, we sit together at my old wooden table, and I give her meat. I give her heart meat and tongue meat." The king said, "So it is her diet." Aha! Without another word, he jumped into the chariot and raced back to the castle, and he said to his royal chef, he said, "From now on, I want you to prepare a meal of heart meat and tongue meat for my bride, for my queen, every day, and this is going to restore her good health and well-being." This was done. And a couple of weeks later, the king noticed that she hadn't improved at all. If anything, she had gotten even worse. And so the king, now desperate for her health now, he loved her a great deal, desperate, he put her into the chariot with him. He knew the way, and he raced across the kingdom, and for a second time he approached the poor man working in the fields, and he said, "I've tried everything. I've tried what you said." He said, she's had this food of meat, of tongue meat and heart meat every day, and she's gotten worse. If anything, she's gotten worse. He said, "I'm terribly worried for her life now. I've made a decision. I'm going to leave her here with you because you've got something going on. There's something about you." He said, "I'm going to leave her here with you, and I'm going to take your wife with me back to the castle." He was the king. He could do whatever he liked. This was done. And a couple of weeks later, the king noticed that the poor man's wife, his sister-in-law, was now starting to show signs of decline and ill health. She had become disinterested in her singing and her joy, and the sparkle had left her eyes. And now he started to get very worried for her. So what did he do the next morning? He put her into the chariot and raced for a third time across the kingdom toward the poor man's land. But this time he pulled up when he got to the poor man's cottage, for out the front he saw a large crowd of children, and they were singing and they were dancing, and they looked full of joy and happiness. And they never heard the horses approaching of the chariot. And the king dismounted, and he walked up and he stood amongst them. And there he saw his queen in the middle of the big crowd of children. And he heard her beautiful singing. And it was like, when you hear an old melody that you once loved and you had forgotten it until you hear it again. It was just like that. And there he stood, enchanted by her, all over again. And he could see that the sparkle had returned to her eyes and the colour had returned to her cheeks. And he waited until the show was all over and the children had gone. And the king walked up to the lady and he said, "My queen, what is the poor man doing with you that has caused your great health and vitality and happiness to be restored like this again?" He said, "What is it?" And she said, "Well, every evening when he comes home from the fields, we sit together at his old wooden table, and he tells me stories, and he recites poetry for me, and he sings me the odd splash of an old song. And this is the meat of the tongue that he spoke to you of. But the stories and the songs and the poetry, they're full of life and love and wonder. And this is the meat of the heart." And the king said to his queen, "If I was to sit with the poor man and learn these skills of the tongue and the heart that you speak of, and learn how to communicate them to you. Would you return and be my queen again?" She said, "Of course." And so legend has it that that king and his queen and the poor man and his queen lived on to be the oldest, the wisest, and the happiest people in the entire kingdom. Thank you for sharing this evening with me, and love to you all.